Big Claus and Little Claus. Once upon a time, there lived in the same village two men bearing the very same name, that is to say, Claus. One of them happened to possess 4 horses, the other only 1 horse. So, by the way of distinguishing them from each other, the proprietor of the 4 horses was called Big Claus, and the one who owned 1 horse was known as Little Claus. All week long, Little Claus had to plow for Big Claus to lend him 1 horse, because Big Claus lent him his 4 horses, but only 1 day a week, and that was Sunday. Rah, how proudly Little Claus then brandished his whip over 5 horses, for all 5 were his, at least for that day. The sun shone brightly, and all the bells in the church towers were ringing. People dressed in their best, walking to church with their little hymn books under their arms, and looked at Little Claus, who was driving his 5 horses, and was so happy that he kept cracking his whip again and again, and calling out, "Hip, hip, hurrah, 5 fine horses, and all of them mine!" "You must not say that," remarked Big Claus. "Only one of the horses is yours. You know that well enough." But when another party of churchgoers passed close by him, Little Claus quite forgot that he had been told he must not say so, and cried out again, "Hip, hip, hurrah, 5 fine horses are all mine!" "Did I not tell you to hold your tongue?" exclaimed Big Claus very angrily. "If you say that again, I shall give your 1 horse such a blow in the forehead, and shall strike him dead on the spot, and that will put an end to your boasting of having 5 fine horses." "Oh, but I will never say it again, indeed I won't," said Little Claus, and he quite intended to keep his word. But presently some more people came by, and they nodded a friendly good morning to him, and he was so delighted, and it seemed to him but such a grand thing to have 5 horses to plow his little field, that he really could not contain himself. He flourished his whip aloft and shouted, "Hip, hip, hurrah, 5 fine horses, and all of them mine!" "I shall soon cure you of that," shouted Big Claus, and taking up a large stone, he flung it to the head of Little Claus's horse, and so heavy was the stone that the poor creature fell down dead. "Alas, now I have no horse at all," cried Little Claus, and began to weep. Then he flayed the skin off his dead horse and put it into a sack which he slung on his shoulder, and set on his way to the nearest town, intending to sell the skin. He had a long way to go, and the road led him through a large and dense wood, and here a violent tempest burst forth. Poor Little Claus lost his path, and before he could find it again, evening had darkened into night, and he could neither return home nor go on to the town. However, not far off stood a large farmhouse. The window shutters were closed, but Little Claus could see light shining through the cracks. "Perhaps I can get shelter here for the night," he thought. So he went up to the house and knocked at the door. The farmer's wife came and opened it to him, and when she heard what he wanted, she told him he must go and ask elsewhere. The farmer was not at home, and she could not receive strangers in his absence. "Well, then, I must sleep outside under the stormy sky," replied Little Claus, and the farmer's wife shut the door in his face. Close by stood a large haystack, and between it and the house there was a little shed with a flat straw roof. "I shall get up there," said Little Claus to himself. "It will make a splendid bed. I only hope that the stork will not fly down and bite my legs." For a stork had made his nest on the roof and had mounted guard beside it, wide awake. So Little Claus crept up on the shed, and there he turned and twisted about until he had made himself comfortable. The window shutters of the farmhouse did not close properly at the top, so that from his high and airy position he could see all that went on in the room. There he saw a large table spread with bread and wine and roast meat and fried fish. The farmer's wife and the sexton sat at the table. No one else was there. The farmer's wife was pouring out a glass of wine for the sexton, who was eagerly helping himself to a large slice of the fish. He happened to be particularly fond of fish. "Too bad to keep it all to themselves," sighed Little Claus. If they would have just given me a morsel. And he craned his neck as near to the window as he could. What a magnificent cake he could see now. Presently he heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the road. It was a farmer riding home. This farmer was a fairly good-hearted fellow, but he could not endure to see the sexton. A sight of made him half mad. And that was the reason why the sexton only came to pay his respects to the farmer's wife when he knew the farmer was out. When they heard the farmer return, they both started up. The woman bade the sexton creep into a large empty chest that stood in the corner of the room. He did so, for he knew the farmer would be furious if he came in and saw it. The farmer's wife then made a great hustle to hide all the wine and dishes inside the baking oven, for fear of her husband. If he saw the table spread within, and should ask whom she had prepared such a grand entertainment. Dear, oh dear, sighed Little Claus from his couch in the shed, when he saw the feast all put away. Anybody up there? Inquired the farmer on hearing the voice, and he looked up and saw Little Claus. Why are you lying there? Come down into the house with me. And Little Claus explained that he had lost his way and asked the farmer if he could not give him shelter for the night. To be sure I will, answered the good-natured man. Come in with me and let's have something to eat. The woman received them both with a great show of welcome, and laid the table and brought out a large dish of oatmeal. The farmer sat down with great appetite, but Little Claus could not eat for thinking of the good roast meats, the fish, the wine, and the delicious cake, which had been stowed away inside the oven. He had put his sack containing the horse's skin under the table. Now he could not relish the oatmeal porridge. He began trembling at the sack under his feet until the skin creaked aloud. Hush, murmured Little Claus, as if speaking to the sack. But at the same time he trod upon it again, as to make it squeak louder than before. What have you got in your sack? Asked the farmer. Oh, I've got a little sorcerer there, replied Little Claus, and he says we're not to eat oatmeal and porridge any longer, for he's conjured a feast of fish, roast beef, and cake in the oven for us. My goodness, exclaimed the farmer, and he got up in a hurry to look into the oven. There he saw all the delicious food which the woman had hidden there. The wife did not dare to utter a syllable of explanation. She pretended to be just as bewildered as her husband, and set the viands on the table, and the farmer and his guest began to eat with a hearty appetite. Presently Little Claus trampled on the sack again, which made the skin squeak once more. What does the sorcerer say now? Asked the farmer. He says, replied Little Claus, that he's also conjured 3 bottles of wine here for us, and you will find them standing just in the corner of the oven. The woman was now obliged to bring out the wine she had concealed, and the farmer poured himself out a glass and began to think it would be a fine thing to have such a sorcerer. A proper sort of sorcerer this is, said. Can he also conjure up the devil, do you think? I would love to see that one, because I am just in the right mood for him. Oh, of course, returned Little Claus. My sorcerer can do anything I ask him. Well, that you will, won't you? He asked the sack again, treading on it. Didn't you hear him say yes? But I will warn you, the devil will look hideous. Better let's forget about him. I will not be afraid. I wonder what he looks like. He will appear for all the world just like a sexton. A sexton, said the farmer. That would be awful. You must know that I cannot stand the sight of a sexton. But it does not matter, since I know that it is not the real sexton. I have plenty of courage, but don't let him come too near me. Well, I will speak to my sorcerer about it, said Little Claus, and he trod on the skin until it went creak, 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 and he bent his ear down as though he were listening. Well, what is he saying now? He says that you only have to lift the lid of that chest in the corner and you'll see him, but you must mind and shut the lid close again, that he cannot escape. Will you help me hold up the lid? It is very heavy, said the farmer, and he went up to the chest where his wife had concealed the real sexton, who was trembling with fear. The farmer gently raised the lid of the chest and peeped into it. Ah, he cried, immediately starting back in disgust. I saw him. He looked exactly like our sexton. How horrible! However, he sat down at the table again and began to drink glass after glass of wine to recover from the shock. Do you know, he said to Little Claus, I'd very much like to buy your sorcerer. Name your price, even if it's a whole bushel full of gold. Oh, how can you ask such a thing? Answered Little Claus. Such a useful servant as he is to me. How could I think of parting with him? I should very much like to have him, said the farmer, and he did not stop pleading. Well, since you have been so kind to give me the shelter tonight, Little Claus, I do not think I can refuse you any request. I will let you have my sorcerer for a bushel of gold. Only the bushel must be crammed full, mind. Certainly it shall, answered the farmer. And the chest over there you shall have in the bargain. I don't want it to remain in the house an hour longer. It will always be reminding me of that odious sexton's face I saw inside it. So the bargain was struck. Little Claus gave the farmer his sack with the dried horse's skin, and received instead a whole bushel full of gold. The farmer also gave him a large wheelbarrow in which to take home his money and the chest. Farewell, said Little Claus, as he pushed away the wheelbarrow and the unfortunate sexton still lying concealed inside it. On the opposite side of the wood flowed a broad, deep river. The current was so strong that no one could swim against it, so a bridge had been built over it. Little Claus made his way over the bridge, saying very loudly so that the man in the chest might hear him. Now, what use is this old chest to me? It's as heavy as if it were filled with stones. It quite tires me out. I shall fling it into the river. If it floats homeward to me, well and good. If it does not, it does not matter either. And he lifted the chest with one hand, as though intending to throw it into the water. Pray don't do that, cried the sexton inside the chest. Let me out first, please. Hello, said Little Claus, and pretended to be much afraid. He's still in there. The sooner it's in the river, the better. Oh, no, no, cried the sexton. Let me out, and I will give you another whole bushelful of gold. That's quite another matter, said Little Claus, and he immediately set down the chest and lifted the lid. Out crept the sexton, greatly to his own satisfaction. He kicked the empty chest into the water, and then took Little Claus to his house with him, where he gave him a bushelful of gold, as agreed. Little Claus now had a wheelbarrow full of money. I have been paid very well for my horse's skin, he said to himself as he entered his own little room. It will vex Big Claus when he finds out how rich my horses made me, but I shall not tell him how it came about. And now he sent the little boy to Big Claus to borrow a measure for him. What can he want with a measure, I wonder, thought Big Claus, and he cunningly smeared the bottom of the measure with pitch, hoping that some part of whatever was measured would stick to it. And so it happened. When the measure was returned to him, he discovered 3 gold coins sticking to the bottom. Fine doings, upon my word, exclaimed Big Claus, and he set off to the house of Little Claus. Where'd you get all that money? Oh, I got it from my horse's skin, which I sold yesterday in the market, was his reply. Really? Exclaimed Big Claus. A horse's skin's worth that much. And he ran home quickly, took an axe and struck all 4 of his horses in the head with it, then flayed off the skins and drove into town. Skins, skins, who will buy my skins? He shouted, driving through the streets. The shoemakers and tanners came running out to him and asking for a price. I want a bushelful of gold for each, replied Big Claus. Are you mad? They cried. We do not reckon our money by bushels. Skins, fresh skins, who will buy skins? He cried again. But to all who asked the price, he answered, a bushelful of gold. He's trying to make a fools of us, said one of the prospective customers, and the shoemakers seized upon the straps and the tanners of their leather aprons, and they began hitting Big Claus. Fresh skins, skins, fine fresh skins, they married them. We shall tan your own skin until you are black and blue. Throw him into the town. And Big Claus was venomously thrown out of the town, and he returned home, in no very good humor. Little Claus shall pay for this, he muttered when he arrived home. I shall kill him. So it happened that Little Claus's grandmother died that evening, and in her lifetime she had been very cross in her nature, but nevertheless Little Claus felt sorry for her. He laid the dead woman in his own warm bed, hoping that the warmth might bring her back to life again. For his own part, he thought he could spend the night in a chair in the corner of the room, as he had sometimes done before. About midnight, the door opened, and Big Claus, his axe in his hand, came in. He knew well where Little Claus's bed was, and he went straight forwards and struck the dead grandmother a violent blow to the forehead. "That's all for you," he cried. "Now you will never make a fool of me again." And with that he went to the room and returned home. "What a very wicked man he is," said Little Claus. "So he wanted to kill me. It was a good thing my old grandmother was dead already. That blow would have hurt her very much." Then he dressed his grandmother in her Sunday best, borrowed a horse from a neighbor, and put it in a cart and placed the old woman firmly in the back seat so that she could not fall out. And that was how he drove off through the wood. When the sun rose again, the carriage arrived at a large inn. Little Claus stopped there and went in for some breakfast. The landlord had plenty of money and was also good-natured, but he was also very hot-tempered, as it were to make a mixture of salt and pepper. "A very good morning to you," welcomed Little Claus. "Are you on your way early today?" "That is so," said Little Claus. "I'm taking my old grandmother to town. She's sitting out the carriage, and I cannot make her come into the room. Would you mind taking her a glass of beer? But you must raise your voice. She is a bit hard of hearing." "I shall do that," promised the landlord, and he filled a large glass with beer and went it up to the old grandmother, who was sitting very upright in the carriage. "Your grandson is sending you a glass of beer," said the landlord, very politely. But the dead woman sat quite still and stiff. "Can't you hear me?" shouted the landlord as loud as he could. "Here's a glass of beer from your grandson." He shouted again and again, but when the grandmother still did not stir, he became angry and threw the glass into her face, so that the beer ran over her bonnet. She fell back in the carriage, for Little Claus had set her upright, but he had not tied her fast. "Hey!" shouted Little Claus, running from the inn and grabbing the landlord by the chest. "You have killed my grandmother!" "Oh, what a misfortune!" cried the landlord, and wrung his hands in despair. "That is all because of my hot temper. Dear Little Claus, I will give you a bushelful of money and will bury your grandmother as though she were my own. But keep silent in the matter, for heaven's sake, or they will hang me. And that would be too bad, wouldn't it?" Thus Little Claus received a whole bushelful of money, and the landlord gave his mother the most lavish funeral you could imagine. When Little Claus arrived back home with his money, he again sent the little boy to Big Claus, asking for the loan of his measure. "What?" cried Big Claus. "Didn't I kill him? I've got to see this with my own eyes." So he took the measure and went over to Little Claus's house himself. "Where did you get all that money again?" he asked, and opened his eyes so wide that it hurt him when he saw the big heap of money. "You did not kill me, but my grandmother, you wicked man," said Little Claus. "I've gone and sold her. They give me a bushelful of money for her." "That is a lot of money," said Big Claus. And he ran home, took an axe, and killed his own grandmother. Then he put her in a carriage and drove into town. He stopped at the apothecary's house and asked him if he would not like to buy a dead person. "What was it, and where is the corpse?" asked the apothecary. "It is my grandmother," asked Big Claus. "I've just killed her, and now I want to sell her for a bushelful of money." "God bless my soul," said the apothecary. "You're mad. Hold your tongue, or you might lose your head." Then he impressed on Big Claus what a terribly wicked deed he had done, and what a bad man he was, and that he ought to be punished. That frightened Big Claus so much that he rushed away, jumped on his carriage, and whipped his horses furiously, and sped home. The apothecary and all the people who had listened to the conversation were quite sure the man was mad, and so they let him go where he liked. "I shall get you for this," said Big Claus while driving home on the highway. "Little Claus, I shall reckon up on you." Scarcely had he arrived home when he took the largest sack he could lay his hands on and went over to Little Claus and said furiously, "You have made a fool of me again. I've killed my horses and now my old grandmother. This is all your fault. I will drown you at once and put an end to your tall tales." Then he seized Little Claus by the waist and thrust him into the sack, and he went off with him. He had a long way before he reached the river, and Little Claus was by no means light. The road led past the church when organ was playing, for the service had just begun, and people were singing beautifully. Big Claus thought there would be no harm in going into the church and joining him before he continued on his way. So at the church door he set down a heavy sack with Little Claus inside, for he felt sure Little Claus could not escape, and all the other people were inside the church. Oh dear, said Little Claus inside the sack, and he twisted and turned as much as he could, but it was all in vain, for he could not loosen the strings with which the sack had been tied together. Just then a very old cattle drove passed by. His white hair was snow and a stout staff in hand. He was driving a large herd of cows and bullocks before him, many more than he, feeble as he was, could manage. One of them rushed up against the sack and turned it over and over. "Have pity on me," cried Little Claus. "I'm too young to die. Help me out of the sack." "And I, poor man," said the cattle driver, "am so very old and cannot get into heaven." "Open the sack," shouted Little Claus. "Change places with me, and you will get to heaven almost once." "With all my heart," said the cattle driver, and he opened the sack, and Little Claus jumped out. "Will you not drive these cattle home to the village for me?" asked the old man. And with that he crept into the sack. Little Claus tied it up and went on his way cheerfully with all those beautiful cows and bullocks. Presently Big Claus came running back. He took up the sack and once more flung it across his shoulder, thinking that the burden seemed very much lighter, for the old cattle drover was only half the weight of Little Claus. "It always does when good rest for so tired," thought Big Claus. So on he trudged to the river, which was wide and deep, and flung the sack with the old cattle driver into it and shouted after it, "There now, Little Claus, you will never cheat me any more." For he was quite sure that Little Claus had been inside the sack. Then he turned homewards, and passing a spot where several roads crossed, whom should he meet but Little Claus himself, with a herd of fine cattle. "How comes this?" exclaimed Big Claus. "Have I gone mad? Didn't I drown you just now?" "Of course," cried Little Claus amiably. "Just half an hour ago you threw me into the river." "But how did you come by all these beautiful cattle?" "These are sea cattle," said Little Claus. "If you like, I will tell you the whole story. I'm very much obliged to you for drowning me. It was only made me more than richer. As you see, I was very frightened when I lay in the sack, and the wind whistled most uncomfortably into my ears when you threw me down the bridge into the cold water. I sank to the bottom at once, but I was not hurt, because down under there grows the softest, freshest grass you can imagine. Now I fell on these grass downs, my sack was opened, and the most beautiful young girl, clad in snow-white robe with green wreath of wet hair, took me by the hand and said, 'Oh, you Little Claus, there's some cattle for you, and a little farther up another larger herd is grazing. You can have that too.' Then I understood that the river was a sort of highway for the people to see, and that on it they walk and drive to and fro from the sea up where the river rises. And no place can be more beautiful than at the bottom of the water. The prettiest flowers and the freshest green grass grow down there, and the fishes in the water swim around my ears, just like the birds flutter around us up here in the air. And such gaily dressed people I saw, and such a multitude of cattle grazing in pastures enclosed with hedges and ditches." "Then why are you in such a hurry to come up again?" inquired Big Claus. "I shouldn't have done so. If not, I would have found it so pleasant down there." "Well, you see," answered Little Claus, "that was very cleverly done on my part. Didn't I tell you that the sea lady told me a mile up the road, and by that she can only mean the river, because she cannot come onto our land roads. There was another and larger herd of cattle for me. But I know that the river makes a great many turns and windings, and therefore I thought I could just save myself half a mile by way of taking a short cut across the land. So here I am, you see, and soon I shall get my sea cattle." "What a lucky fellow you are," exclaimed Big Claus. Do you think I can get some cattle driven to me, too, if I went down to the bottom of the river? How can I tell? Asked Little Claus in reply. You envious scoundrel, cried Big Claus. I bet you want to keep all the beautiful sea cattle for yourself. Either you carry me to the water's edge and throw me over, or I will kill you. Please don't be so angry, entreated Little Claus. I cannot carry you in a sack to the river. You are too fat and heavy. But if you will walk there yourself and creep into a sack, I will throw you over with all the pleasure in the world. Thank you, but if I find no sea cattle down there for me, I shall kill you all the same when I come back. And with that, they walked together to the river, and as soon as the thirsty cattle saw the water, they ran as fast as they could, all wanting to drink. Look how they long to be at the bottom of the river, said Little Claus. That's all very well, said Big Claus. You must help me first, or I shall hit you. And he quickly crept into a great sack which had lain stretched across the shoulders of one of the oxen. Put a heavy stone in here with me, said Big Claus. Else perhaps I might not sink to the bottom. No fear of that, replied Little Claus. However, he put a large stone into the sack, tied the strings firmly, and pushed the sack into the water. Bloop. There it fell, straight to the bottom. I am much afraid he will get his punishment and will not find a sea cattle, observed Little Claus. And then he drove his own herd quietly back to the village.